Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad you're with us for the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Good, bad, crazy martinis straight ahead for you. Jim, I'm keeping one eye on this Pete Hegseth confirmation hearing before the Senate Armed Services Committee. It's not one of our martinis today, but he's one of the embattled nominees, as the media likes to put it. Just looking at the murderer's row of mental giants on the Democratic side of this panel, we go after Jack Reed, the ranking member there. A couple down, you've got Gillibrand, followed by Blumenthal, followed by Hirono. And then eventually you get to Tim Kaine, and somehow Elizabeth Warren is on the Senate Armed Services Committee as well. So, this is going to be a very civil, no ad hominem attacks and anything like that. It's just going to be very, very mature and professional the whole way through, I'm sure.
I suspect Blumenthal is willing to put his service up against Hegseth's and talk about all those tough times back in Nam. Just like back in Nam, right, Slick? To quote Agent Johnson.
That's right. I was in junior high. Fill in the blank. Okay. All right. On to our good martini now. This is a follow-up from a martini from early December, which was President Biden pardoning his son, Hunter. And in the process, not just pardoning Hunter, but trying to disparage and ruin the reputation of Robert Weiss, although he's not specifically mentioned. Weiss is the special prosecutor in this case. People from the Justice Department and the special counsel team that decided to press charges against Hunter Biden. Joe Biden very unhappy that the ridiculous plea deal fell apart and that prosecution then advanced in Delaware on the gun charges and California on the tax charges, and all sorts of pejoratives got thrown out in that statement, saying that Hunter was selectively and unfairly prosecuted as a result of pressure from several of my political opponents in Congress. And ultimately, he says that, if he wasn't my son, none of this would have happened. People in his circumstances, not named Biden, would never have faced jail time, yada, yada, yada. So Weiss is now firing back in his final report on this case, saying, quote, other presidents have pardoned family members, but in doing so, none have taken the occasion as an opportunity to malign the public servants at the Department of Justice based solely on false accusations. He also defended the impartiality of the Justice Department's decision-making process, saying, quote, these prosecutions were the culmination of thorough, impartial investigations, not partisan politics. 8 judges across numerous courts have rejected claims they were the result of selective or vindictive motives. Calling those rulings into question and injecting partisanship into the independent administration of the law undermines the very foundation of what makes America's justice system fair and equitable. It erodes public confidence in an institution that is essential to preserving the rule of law. So, Jim, a credit to Weiss for laying the wood to the president here and telling him that his comments were way out of line.
When I read these comments, I was reminded of the comments by Special Counsel Herr. And the assessment that, yes, President Biden did take classified documents to his home. Yes, that was a violation of the law. But there was really no point in prosecuting because the jury would perceive Biden as a, kindly old man with memory issues who couldn't remember, taking any of the stuff. And, Biden went out there and screamed bloody murder. And he claimed that, Herr had brought up the issue of what year his son had died and stuff like that. Then the transcript came out and lo and behold. Well, actually, no, Biden brought it up. And yes, Biden could not remember that, all that stuff. Joe Biden has a really bad record when it comes to going toe-to-toe with prosecutors. And it was, we should point out, it wasn't just this counsel. District Court Judge Mark Scarsi earlier in the year had said, no, there was nothing wrong with the prosecution of this case. There was no indication of bias. There was no indication that the Department of Justice was out to get Hunter Biden or anything like that. This is nonsense. And now in this case, also apparently, we haven't heard this, but it's been said that Biden has complained about Merrick Garland being, his attorney general, being unfair against his son. Well, first of all, who went out to the country and told us that Merrick Garland was like the most fair and honorable and swell guy ever? Oh, that's right, Joe Biden. Right, so if you really want somebody, if you really think Merrick Garland screwed up, and there's no indication that Merrick Garland has unfairly targeted Hunter Biden in any way, shape, or form. But if you think that's the case, you really should blame the guy who appointed him, Mr. President, which was you. You're the one who did this. Secondly, I don't love the talk that Donald Trump said about pardoning everybody associated with January 6th and things like that. But if you don't want him to do that, the Democratic Party had to stand for something better. It needed to show another better example. And unfortunately, Hunter Biden is the kind of man who every time in life he's been given a choice, he seems to have picked the most self-destructive option. He's a really, really troubled guy. He goes well beyond the drug addiction. I think, the example that keeps popping into my head was the attempt to claim prostitutes as a tax deduction.
Yeah.
And that's it's funny. It's weird. It's comical, but at the same time, it's kind of the ridiculousness of how much Hunter Biden believed the laws did not apply to him. And broke gun laws. Who's his dad trying to do? He's trying to enforce gun control. He broke tax laws. What's his dad want to do? He wants to raise taxes. The rich aren't paying their fair share. All that stuff. And what this demonstrates, and I'm glad to see Weiss rip it into the president. The older I get, the less I can stand presidents and really high-level government officials talking about how unfair everything is, and how unfair life is, and how they never get a break. This is the responsibility of leadership. Stop telling me how hard you have it. You do darn well the consequences of your actions when you went into this. So good for you, Weiss. I think, the pardon of Hunter Biden is going to be seen as a particularly ignoble chapter in a presidency that has had a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, and they're not done yet. Who knows what and who he's going to pardon over here the last few days. And as you suggested online, maybe there needs to be an end to pardons after Election Day in a lame duck session. But that's a discussion for another time. But Jim, another frustrating part of this is that the Weiss report is going to get overshadowed by the Jack Smith report, who never took anything to trial and just said, I'm just confident we would have gotten conviction. So if not for the American people returning Donald Trump to the White House, he'd be a convicted felon again many, many times over. And in the D.C. case, I'm sure he would have been, because like in Manhattan, getting a jury to acquit Donald Trump is going to be pretty much not going to happen. But in Florida, he had at least a 50-50 chance of getting acquitted.
I was going to say, did we expect Jack Smith to come out and say, yeah, this was a really risky shot? This was a Hail Mary pass of an indictment. There's no way I'm persuading. Well, of course he's going to say, this would have been a slam dunk. Probably quoting George Tenet.
All right, Jim, kind of a multifaceted bad martini here, but the kickoff point is this story from CBS News. When J.D. Vance, his wife Usha, and their 3 young children move into the Naval Observatory residence on January 20th, it will be their first time inside the white Queen Anne-style mansion that has been home to Vice President since the 1970s. Vice President Kamala Harris has not extended an invitation for a formal sit-down or tour, multiple Democratic and Republican sources told CBS News. In November, Usha Vance, via intermediaries, reached out to staff for the home's current occupants, Harris and second gentleman Doug Emhoff. Boy, gentleman's used very loosely there, seeking details, including what they would need to childproof it since all of their kids are under the age of 8. The questions were initially rebuffed by a Harris political appointee, but there has since been communication between the Vance team and Navy aides who oversee the residence. And so the story here is that Harris never invited Vance for, the photo op and the obligatory tour of the mansion. The Harris people are saying, well, we didn't get that last time because Trump was disputing the election the whole time. Pence's people say that they secretly offered to do that off camera because they knew Trump would not be very happy about the fact if they did it publicly. And I guess that did not happen. It was also during COVID, so a whole bunch of different circumstances there. But Jim, you not only have some thoughts about this, but also about what Kamala Harris is and isn't doing in her final days in her actual job.
Yeah, I bet the nicest thing we can say about this, Greg, is that a request to tour and, take a look around the Naval Observatory and the Vice President's residence, it's not the worst thing that Doug Emhoff has slapped away in recent years. All in all, look, I recognize that you spend really an intense campaign season. Before then, Harris was running for re-election as vice president. Losing the election's got to be a great disappointment, but we're coming up on 2 months now. You can take some time to say, hey, actually, you don't even really need to be there. Just allow the Vances to come over and check out the place. This is really, nobody's asking you to become best friends, film a buddy cop movie together. This is really minor stuff. And remember, this was the crew that was going to restore norms and was going to restore civility to Washington. America is back. We're a better, and all that kind of stuff. Didn't do it. So that's problem number one. Disappointing to see Kamala Harris not doing this. And the second thing is that, as listeners to this podcast know, and readers of the Morning Jolt know I've been covering the wildfires out in California pretty intensely. It's not that Harris has said nothing about it. She had a little bit of a kind of word salad-y statement about the need for patience. But look, since the election, there have been talk about whether Harris wants to run for president again in 2028. Listen for a moment. You hear that? That's everybody calling for her to run for president again in the Democratic Party. But there's also been talk that she might want to run for governor of California in 2026. Well, it's a free country and she could do that. But if I wanted to do that and the biggest city in my state was burning to the ground, I would want to be front and center on this. I would want to be out there every day. Apparently, one of her residences out there was at risk of the fires at one point. Like, you would think this would be a moment to step up. When the first rumor came out that she was thinking of running for governor, no offense, but you've been living in Washington, D.C. for the past 4 years. Now, obviously, she was a senator from California before then. It's not like she has no familiarity with the state. Sure, her legal residence is still out there. But, you may not necessarily be up to speed on every little detail involved with what the California state government is doing. And I've been reporting on this, particularly in terms of their fire policies. There's a lot to critique there. I feel like I haven't seen her do very much on this issue. And again, I understand it stinks to run for president really hard and to lose so bitterly. But you still have a day job. And, you need to take a couple of days. Everybody would understand. But it's now been 2 months. You're only in office for another 7 days, or actually less than that as of this recording.
Yeah.
You'd think you'd be front and center. And I don't know whether this means going out to L.A., whether this means directing the federal response to this. I think there's a lot of room to criticize. I think both in terms of the local policy decisions made in L.A., both in terms of the state policy decisions. If you were governor, would you be doing things differently? I think the public would like to know. And maybe she doesn't run for governor. Maybe she doesn't run for president. Maybe she wants to recede from public life, and if that's her choice, great. But if she does want to be governor, now would be a really good time to be front and center in addressing these things, not 4 months from now to say, well, here's what I would have done differently.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. But we'll see what her plans are. I'd kind of be surprised if she ran for governor because she'd have to announce pretty quickly. There's so many people already in the race, and the process is going to get going, fundraising and all that. And, Doris is tired. Doris has been getting a lot of fundraising requests about Kamala Harris for a long, long time. And so I don't think Doris is ready for that to fire back up again. But 2028, I hate to break it to her, but it's not going to be a coronation like it was in 2024, basically handed to you on a silver platter. It's going to be a very crowded field on both sides because Trump can't run for re-election. But she's going to be running against the likes probably of Gretchen Whitmer, possibly Pete Buttigieg if he doesn't run for governor of Michigan, and a lot of other people, governors and so forth, that definitely want a shot at the nomination. So going to be very, very interesting to watch. But anyway, yes, the final Tuesday of the Biden administration. So glad about that. Here's another thing I'm glad about. Oracle, because whether you like it or not, AI, even though you might think it's a bit overhyped, it's suddenly everywhere. And it's involved in everything from self-driving cars to molecular medicine to business efficiency. And if it's not in your industry just yet, trust me, it's coming, and it's coming fast. But AI needs a lot of speed and a lot of computing power. So how do you compete in that area without costs spiraling out of control? Well, it's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud with Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI.
OCI is a blazing fast and secure platform for all of your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI and machine learning workloads. OCI costs 50% less for computing and 80% less for networking, so you're saving a pile of money. Thousands of businesses have already upgraded to OCI, including Vodafone, Thomson Reuters, and Suno AI.
Right now, Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move over to OCI. For new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment. Offer ends March 31st. See if your company qualifies for this special offer at oracle.com/martini. That's oracle.com/martini. All right, Jim, I promise I'm not looking for these clips, but Joe Biden just keeps producing them on a daily basis. At least sometimes it's multiple head scratchers in the same statement, like we had last Friday with Kamala would have beaten Trump. No, she didn't. And he's going to be looking at pardons based on who Trump talks about over the final few days of this administration. But not exactly sure of the setting here. It looks like it's in the East Room. There's music in the background of this clip, so it feels like it's kind of from that same ceremony with the Presidential Medals of Freedom, where George Soros and a bunch of other people who probably didn't deserve it got the Medal of Freedom, but it could be from a more recent event. I don't actually know. Nonetheless, the issue of immigration comes up here, and when it comes to the border, Joe Biden is convinced he did a fantastic job.
Look, let's get something in mind about the border. When I became president, the numbers came way down, number one. Number two, we had a circumstance where I pushed very hard for a bipartisan agreement to put more people on the border, more Secret Service agents. And guess what? He's on the phone saying, don't do it. Don't do it. Make me look bad.
So, Jim, at this point, I don't know if it's delusion and he actually believes this, or he's been telling the lie so long he just doesn't know the difference at this point, or he just wants to keep telling the lie. I don't know. But on this particular issue, it's probably the one Biden has botched, some would say by far the worst over the past 4 years. And he's just trying to gaslight us all the way to the finish line.
So, no, that is not the case. In fact, it was exceptionally low when Biden took office. Now, some of this, you want to credit Trump, you can, but a lot of this had to do with the COVID. That basically everybody was, stuck in their houses. People were not moving around. And that was one of the reasons, right around December, January of end of 2020, beginning of 2021, it was really, really low. Biden takes office, jumps up in February, jumps up in March. Some of that, indisputably, was people getting, oh, okay, there's a new administration in town. They're not going to have the same enforcement that Trump does. Now it's our time to go across the border. Some of it also was these, we're starting to roll out the vaccines then, and the concern over COVID was starting to subside there. But, Biden got asked about this at the end of March 2021. And they got asked about this. And he says, look, it happens every single solitary year. There's a significant increase in the number of people coming to the border in the winter months of January, February, March. Happens every year. And he just said maybe similar remarks in the press conference again. So, one, he's remembering the opposite of what happened. Two, at the time, he said it was no big deal. Three, it turned out to be a big deal, and it turned out to be a big deal for almost the entirety of his presidency. There's a little bit of a tailing off in the final year of his office, but at this point, it's kind of fair to wonder, did Central America just start running out of people? That's what, there were so few of them. I exaggerate slightly, but you get the gist of it. I'm also reminded of several times this year when Joe Biden insisted that inflation was 9% when he took office. No, it was not. It was very low. Now, remember, it's COVID. It's very unusual economic circumstances. People couldn't leave their homes. People couldn't go on trips. People couldn't go out and go to Disneyland, all the stuff that they usually would do to stimulate the economy. Let's also remember unemployment was very high during the peak of COVID. Now, by the end of 2020, it was starting to come back down again as, started reopening society. Remember the social distancing and all that kind of stuff. But, this is now on two big issues where Biden is remembering the opposite of what happened. And it's kind of fair to ask, if he doesn't remember 3 years ago accurately, how well does he remember what he's told in his briefings? How well does he remember anything these days? This is why you should not have an 82-year-old president. I would argue you really shouldn't have a 79, 80, or 81-year-old president, except President-elect Trump is 78. A lot more energy, and hopefully the memory is working a lot better. But every day, Biden goes out there, and it's not just exaggerating. I know, malarkey. Biden was always something of a BS artist to begin with.
Yeah.
But I think it's genuinely, he just doesn't remember anything anymore. And that's a very terrifying condition for a president to be in. And as of today, we've only got 6 more days of this, Greg.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I would clarify that point just by saying certainly an 82-year-old in his condition should not be president of the United States. Ideally, you probably want him a little younger anyway, but there are 82-year-olds who are plenty sharp. He's not one of them. He was not a sharp 70-year-old or 60-year-old or 50-year-old, but he's
President
definitely
Chuck
not up to it,
Grassley,
man.
we're probably going to be fine. Chuck Grassley would tell Chuck Grassley remembers like Pepperidge Farm.
Chuck Grassley, man, that guy's like Timex. He just keeps on ticking, and you follow his social media, and he's stopping at Dairy Queen, and he's got that vacuum cleaner from like 1955 that he always busts out whenever he's got company over. You can set your watch to Chuck Grassley.
When the sun goes supernova, it's going to be the cockroaches, Chuck Grassley, and Keith Richards.
Sounds about right. Jim, see you tomorrow for the last Wednesday of the Biden administration.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corumbus of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please subscribe to the podcast. If you don't already, tell your friends to do so as well. Thanks for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. They're a big help to us. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Tuesday. Join us again on Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.